Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Titan, looking out at the endless stars through the large window. The ship was quiet tonight, floating in deep space far from Earth. Most of the crew was sleeping, but Jake never slept well during night shifts. Something about the darkness and silence made him restless. The bridge was dim, lit only by the soft glow of control panels and computer screens. Lieutenant Amy Foster sat at the communications station, her fingers dancing across the keyboard, as she monitored radio signals from across the galaxy. She had been doing this job for 3 years, and it was always the same. Empty space, empty signals, empty silence. Jake walked over to the coffee machine and poured himself a cup of the bitter, black liquid. It was terrible coffee, but it kept him awake. He had been commanding the Titan for 2 years now, and every day was the same routine. Patrol the outer edge of human space, watch for threats, send reports back to Earth. Nothing ever happened. Out here. Sir? Amy called out suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet. I'm getting something strange. Jake set down his coffee cup and walked over to her station. What kind of strange? Amy adjusted her headset and frowned at her screen. It's a signal, but not like anything I've seen before. It's coming from deep space, about 400 light-years away. The pattern is really weird. Jake looked at the display over her shoulder. Numbers and symbols scrolled across the screen in a pattern that repeated every few seconds. Play it for me. The bridge filled with a series of beeps and tones, mathematical and precise. It went on for 30 seconds, then started again from the beginning. The same pattern, the same timing, over and over. How long has it been transmitting? Jake asked. About 10 minutes now, same pattern every time. Amy looked up at him with confusion in her eyes. Sir, this isn't human. I've never seen anything like this before. Jake felt his heart start to beat faster. In all the years humans had been exploring space, they had never found any sign of other intelligent life. Earth was alone in the galaxy, or so everyone thought. But this signal was clearly artificial, clearly made by something with intelligence. Wake up Dr. Bennett, Jake ordered. Get him up here right now. Amy nodded and pressed a button on her console. Dr. Bennett to the bridge, emergency call. Within 5 minutes, Dr. Paul Bennett stumbled onto the bridge, still wearing his pajamas and looking annoyed. Paul was the ship's science officer, a tall, thin man with gray hair and thick glasses. He was the smartest person on the ship, but he was not a morning person. This better be important, Morrison, Paul grumbled. I was having a very nice dream about being back on Earth. Listen to this, Jake said, and nodded to Amy. She played the signal again. Paul's annoyed expression quickly changed to one of intense interest. He grabbed a chair and sat down next to Amy, studying the patterns on her screen. My God, he whispered. This is artificial. Definitely artificial. He looked up at Jake with wide eyes. Jake, this is first contact. This is what we've been waiting for our entire lives. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. First contact. The words every human had dreamed of hearing. They were not alone in the universe after all. Can you decode it? Jake asked. Paul was already working, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Give me some time. The pattern is mathematical, which is smart. Math is universal. Any intelligent species would understand basic mathematics. For the next 6 hours, Paul worked without stopping. Amy brought him coffee and sandwiches, but he barely noticed. The rest of the bridge crew had woken up and gathered around to watch. Everyone knew they were witnessing history. Finally, Paul leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. I've got it, he said quietly. At least part of it. The bridge fell silent. Jake's hands were shaking as he waited for Paul to continue. It's a distress call, Paul said. They're asking for help. The mathematical part contains star charts showing where they are. There are also numbers that might be casualty reports or ship counts. But Jake, the most important part is this. Paul pressed a button and the signal played again, but this time it sounded different. Instead of just beeps and tones, Jake could hear something else underneath. Fear, desperation, panic. They're scared, Paul continued, really scared. Whatever is happening to them, it's bad. They're sending this message to every star system in range, hoping someone will help them. Jake stared at the screen, thinking hard. How many of them are there? Based on the ship count numbers, maybe 3 or 4 vessels. But Jake, there's something else. They mentioned something called the Devourers in their message. From what I can translate, these Devourers are hunting them. They've been running for a long time. Amy looked up from her station. Sir, I'm picking up the signal from other directions too. They're broadcasting this message in all directions as far as their transmitters can reach. This isn't just a call for help. This is a call for anyone who will listen. Jake walked back to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, intelligent beings were dying. They had sent a message across the galaxy, hoping someone would care enough to help them. And that message had reached humanity. Amy, send a message to Earth immediately. Tell Admiral Hayes we have first contact and request immediate orders. Include all the data we've collected. Yes, sir. Jake turned back to Paul. How long would it take us to reach them? Paul calculated quickly. At maximum speed, about 3 days. But Jake, we don't know what we're flying into. These Devourers might be more dangerous than we can handle, Jake nodded. I know, but we can't just ignore this. These beings are asking for help. If we were in their position, we'd want someone to answer our call. The message to Earth took 4 hours to reach Admiral Lisa Hayes at Fleet Command. Her response came back 12 hours later, and it was not what Jake expected. All available ships are to rendezvous at your position immediately, Amy read from the message. The Admiral is coming herself with the largest fleet we've ever assembled. We're going to help them. Jake felt a surge of pride in his species. Humanity had always been the kind of people who helped others, even when it was dangerous. Even when it meant facing the unknown. Over the next 2 days, ships began arriving at the Titan's position. First came the heavy cruisers Defiant and Relentless, followed by the medical ship Mercy. Then came 12 destroyers, their sleek hulls gleaming in the starlight. Finally, Admiral Hayes arrived on the UES Liberty. Her flagship. Jake met with the Admiral in the Liberty's conference room. Lisa Hayes was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been commanding human fleets for 20 years, but she had never faced anything like this. What do we know about these aliens? She asked without wasting time on pleasantries. Paul presented his analysis. They call themselves the Kalari Federation. Based on their language patterns, they seem to be a peaceful species. They've been fleeing from these Devourers for months, maybe years. Their homeworld has been destroyed, and they're down to their last few ships. Admiral Hayes studied the star charts. And the Devourers? We don't know much. The Kalari messages suggest they're some kind of hive mind species that consumes entire worlds. They don't just kill, they absorb everything. Knowledge, technology, even the essence of the species they encounter. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she looked up at Jake. How do you feel about this, Commander? Jake didn't hesitate. We have to help them. It's the right thing to do. Admiral Hayes smiled. I agree. Humanity has always stood up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. We're not going to start backing down now. She stood up and addressed the room. Gentlemen, we're about to face the unknown. We don't know what these Devourers are capable of, and we don't know if we can defeat them, but we know one thing for certain. Someone asked for help, and we're going to give it to them. Jake felt a surge of pride as he looked around the room at his fellow officers. They were about to embark on the greatest adventure in human history. First contact with an alien species, and humanity's first step onto the galactic stage. The fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, ready to answer the call for help that had traveled across the galaxy. Whatever they found when they arrived, they would face it together. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the main briefing room of the UES Liberty, looking at the holographic display that showed their fleet formation. 15 ships hung in space like deadly metal sharks, each one bristling with weapons and technology that had been developed over centuries of human conflict. She had never commanded so many vessels at once, but she had never faced a situation like this before either. Captain Steve Collins of the UES Defiant sat at the conference table, reviewing tactical data on his tablet. Steve was a big man with short black hair and scars on his hands from his early days as a Marine. He had been commanding warships for 10 years, but he had never fought anything except other humans. The idea of alien enemies made him both nervous and excited. "What do we know about their weapons?" Steve asked, pointing to the data about the DEVOURES. Dr. Paul Bennett, who had been transferred from the Titan to serve as the fleet's science advisor, shook his head. "Not much. The Kaleri messages mention energy weapons and some kind of biological technology. Their ships seem to be grown rather than built." Admiral Hayes frowned. "Grown? What does that mean?" "The Kaleri describe them as living ships," Paul explained. "They repair themselves, they adapt to damage, and they seem to work as a single organism. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered." Captain Morrison, who had also been called to the meeting, leaned forward. "Admiral, I've been thinking about this. The Kaleri have been running from these devourers for months. They're clearly more advanced than us in some ways, but they can't fight back. Why? It was a good question. The Kaleri had faster than light travel, advanced computers, and sophisticated communication systems. But they had been completely helpless." Against the DEVOURS. Dr. Kate Wilson entered the briefing room, carrying a medical bag and looking tired. Kate was the fleet's chief medical officer, a woman in her 40s with red hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She had been working around the clock to prepare for treating alien injuries. "Sorry I'm late," she said, taking a seat at the table. "I've been setting up the emergency medical protocols." Admiral Hayes nodded. "Kate, what's your assessment of our ability to treat alien injuries?" Kate opened her tablet and showed them her research. "I've been studying the biological data the Kaleri included in their messages. They're carbon-based like us, but their physiology is completely different. They have a crystal-based nervous system, and their blood chemistry is unlike anything on Earth." She pulled up a diagram of Kaleri anatomy. "The good news is that basic trauma care should work. Stop bleeding, stabilize broken bones, treat shock. The bad news is that we have no idea how their bodies will react to our medicines." "Captain," Collins studied the alien biology charts. "They look fragile," he observed. "Their bone structure is very light, almost hollow, and their muscle density is much lower than ours." Paul nodded. "That makes sense. The Kaleri homeworld had lower gravity than Earth and a much more stable climate. They evolved for efficiency, not survival in harsh conditions." Admiral Hayes was beginning to understand something important. "So they're not built for war." "Exactly," Paul replied. "From what I can tell, the Kaleri have been a peaceful species for thousands of years. They've never had to develop weapons or fighting techniques. When the Devourers attacked, they simply had no way to fight back. This was very different from human history. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire existence. Every weapon, every tactic, every piece of military technology had been developed to kill other humans. Earth had been a planet of constant warfare where only the strongest and smartest survived." Colonel Ryan Murphy entered the briefing room, his Marine uniform crisp and his expression serious. Ryan was a career soldier who had served in conflicts across the solar system. He was the kind of man who could kill with his bare hands, but he was also smart enough to know when not to fight. "Admiral," he said, saluting, "my Marines are ready for deployment. We've got 200 of the best fighters in the fleet, equipped with the latest weapons and armor." Admiral Hayes looked at the Marine colonel. "Ryan, I want you to understand something. We're not just going into battle. We're going to meet an alien species for the first time in human history. Your Marines need to be ready for anything." Ryan nodded. "Ma'am, my people are trained for hostile environments and unknown threats. We fought in the asteroid belt, on the moons of Jupiter, and in the deep space stations. We're ready." The Admiral pulled up a tactical display of the star system where the Kaleri were hiding. According to their last message, they're in the Kepler 442 system, taking shelter near the 7th planet. The Devourers are hunting them, moving through the system ship by ship. Captain Collins studied the display. "It's a good place to hide. Lots of asteroids and debris to mask their signatures, but it's also a trap. If the Devourers find them, there's nowhere to run. Admiral Hayes made her decision. We're going in fast and hard. The Devourers won't expect us, and they won't know our capabilities. We use that advantage to hit them before they can adapt. Dr. Wilson raised her hand. Admiral, what about the Kaleri? If they're as fragile as we think, they might not survive? A major battle, the stress alone could kill them. It was another good point. The humans were used to violence and warfare, but the Kaleri had probably never experienced anything like what was coming. We'll have to protect them, Admiral Hayes said. Kate, I want you to prepare medical teams for immediate deployment to their ships. Help them survive the battle. Over the next 18 hours, the human fleet prepared for jump to hyperspace. In the weapons bays, technicians loaded missiles and charged energy weapons. In the medical bays, doctors and nurses prepared emergency supplies and alien-compatible medical equipment. In the troop transports, Marines checked their weapons and armor. Captain Morrison returned to the Titan and gathered his crew. They had been chosen for this mission because they were the best at what they did. Lieutenant Amy Foster continued monitoring the Kaleri distress signals, which were getting weaker and more desperate. Sir, Amy reported, the last message from the Kaleri was 6 hours ago. They're down to 3 ships now, and they're running out of power. Jake felt a surge of urgency. How long until we reach them? 36 hours at maximum speed, his navigation officer replied. It might be too late. The Kaleri could be dead before the human fleet even arrived. But they had to try. On the UES Defiant, Captain Collins met with his weapons officer, Lieutenant Don Parker. Don was a young man who had trained his entire life for space combat. He knew every weapon system on the ship and could hit targets that other gunners couldn't even see. Don, I want you to understand something, Collins said. We're going up against technology we've never seen before. Our weapons might not work the way we expect them to, Den nodded confidently. Sir, human weapons are designed to kill humans. And humans are the toughest, meanest, most adaptable species we know. If our weapons can kill us, they can kill anything. It was a good point. Human weapons had been developed through thousands of years of warfare against the most dangerous predator in the galaxy, other humans. Every gun, every missile, every energy weapon had been built to overcome human intelligence, human armor, and human defenses. Dr. Wilson finished her preparations in the medical bay of the Liberty. She had portable surgical units, emergency medicines, and trauma equipment that could work in any environment. She had also studied every piece of biological data about the Kaleri, trying to understand how to keep them alive. Doctor, her assistant asked, what if we can't save them? Kate looked up from her preparations. Then we'll have done everything we could, but I didn't become a doctor to watch people die. Human or alien, I'm going to save every life I can. Colonel Murphy addressed his Marines in the main assembly hall of the Relentless. 200 of the toughest fighters in human space stood at attention, their faces hard and determined. Marines, he said, we're about to face an enemy that has destroyed entire worlds. They've killed billions of beings and consumed everything in their path. But they've never faced humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. He looked at each of his soldiers, seeing the same determination in their eyes that had carried humanity through centuries of warfare. We come from Earth, he continued, a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, and predators that would terrify these aliens. We didn't just survive, we thrived. We became the apex predators of the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. The Marines stood straighter, pride filling their chests. These Devourers think they're the ultimate predators, Murphy said. They're about to learn what real predators look like. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Liberty, looking out at her fleet. 15 ships, 3,000 crew members, and the hopes of 2 species rested on her shoulders. In a few hours, they would jump to hyperspace and begin humanity's first interstellar war. All ships report ready, her communications officer announced. Admiral Hayes took a deep breath. All ships? This is Admiral Hayes. We're about to make history. We're going to save the Kaleri Federation, and we're going to show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Jump to hyperspace in 3, 2, 1, execute. The stars stretched into lines of light as the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward their first. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and Admiral Hayes immediately knew they had arrived at a battlefield. The sensors on the Liberty detected debris clouds scattered throughout the system, the remains of what had once been a thriving civilization. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Amy Foster from her position at the communications station. She had been transferred to the flagship for this mission, and her voice carried a mixture of awe and horror as she read the sensor data. Captain Morrison, now serving as Admiral Hayes' tactical advisor, studied the holographic display that showed the system layout. Dozens of metal fragments drifted in the cold vacuum of space, each piece a remnant of destroyed ships. Some were huge, the size of city blocks, while others were small enough to be personal belongings. "Admiral," called out Lieutenant Commander Jerry Walsh, the fleet's sensor officer, "I'm detecting 3 large objects moving toward the inner system. They match the energy signatures from the Kaleri distress calls." Admiral Hayes felt her heart race. After 36 hours of traveling through hyperspace, they had finally reached the aliens who had asked for help. "Put it on screen," she ordered. The main display showed 3 massive ships limping through space toward a distant star. Even from this distance, it was clear that the vessels were damaged. They moved slowly, leaving trails of gas and debris behind them. These were the last survivors of the Kaleri Federation. "Amy, can you establish communication with them?" Admiral Hayes asked. Amy's fingers flew over her keyboard as she tried to match the alien communication frequencies. "I'm trying, ma'am. Their signal is very weak, but I think I can boost it through our main array." After several minutes of adjustments, a crackling voice filled the bridge. The words were in an alien language, but the universal translator that Dr. Bennett had programmed was working. "Unknown vessels, please identify yourselves," the voice said, carrying a tone of exhaustion and fear. "We are the last ships of the Kaleri Federation. If you are here to help us, we welcome you. If you are here to destroy us, please make it quick." Admiral Hayes stepped forward. "This is Admiral Lisa Hayes of the United Earth Space Fleet. We received your distress call and have come to help you." There was a long silence. Then the voice returned, filled with disbelief. "You do actually came? We sent that message to dozens of star systems. No one else responded." "We're here now, Admiral." Hayes replied, "We want to help you." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at an alien face. The being was tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to be made of living crystal. His eyes were large and blue, and they held the weight of someone who had watched his entire civilization die. "I am Commander Zethkara of the Kaleri vessel Harmony," the alien said. "Forgive my appearance. We have been fleeing for many months, and we are very tired." Dr. Kate Wilson, who was standing near the communications station, stepped forward. "Commander, this is Dr. Wilson. Are you injured? Do you need medical assistance?" Zethkara's expression showed surprise. "You offer medical help to strangers? Your species is very different from ours." "We help anyone who needs help, Admiral," Hayes said simply. "That's what we do." The alien commander seemed to struggle with this concept. "We have wounded aboard our ships, many wounded. But we do not know if your medicines will work on our bodies." Dr. Wilson nodded. "We've studied your biology from the data in your distress calls. I believe we can help you. Will you allow us to send medical teams to your ships?" Before Zethkara could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. "Lieutenant Commander." Walsh looked up from his sensors with fear in his eyes. "Admiral, we have multiple contacts approaching from the outer system. Large vessels moving fast. They match the energy signatures the Kaleri described as devourer ships." Admiral Hayes felt ice in her veins. "How many?" 12 ships, ma'am. They're bigger than anything in our fleet." On the screen, Commander Zethkara's face went pale. "They found us. The devourers have found us again." Admiral Hayes made a quick decision. "All ships, battle stations, Amy, keep this channel open. Commander Zethkara, we're going to protect you." The alien commander shook his head sadly. Admiral Hayes, you do not understand. The Devourers are not like other enemies. They do not simply kill, they absorb everything. Knowledge, technology, the very essence of the species they encounter. They have consumed dozens of civilizations. Tell me about them, Admiral Hayes demanded, knowing that information could mean the difference. Between victory and defeat, Zethkara's voice became heavy with grief. They appeared in our space 3 years ago. At first, we thought they were just another species looking for trade or alliance, but they began attacking our outer colonies without warning. They didn't want our resources or our territory. They wanted us. The alien commander paused, his crystal-like features reflecting the light from his ship's displays. When they capture a world, they don't just kill the population. They somehow absorb the knowledge and memories of everyone they encounter. Each world they consume makes them stronger and smarter. Captain Morrison stepped forward. How many worlds have they taken? 47, Zethkara replied quietly. 47 worlds, including our homeworld of Kellerus. Billions of lives, all absorbed into their collective consciousness. Dr. Wilson felt sick. That's horrible. How do they do it? We don't know, Zethkara admitted. They use some kind of biological technology. Their ships are alive. Their weapons are alive. Everything about them is organic. They adapt to any attack, learn from any defense. Admiral Hayes studied the tactical display showing the approaching Devourer fleet. The ships were massive, easily 3 times the size of human vessels. But more disturbing was their appearance. They didn't look built, they looked grown, like enormous sea creatures swimming through space. Commander, she said to Zethkara, why didn't other species help? You? You said you sent distress calls to dozens of systems. The aliens' expression became even sadder. They were afraid. The Devourers had already consumed the Mentari Empire and the Zephyrian Alliance. When other species learned what was happening, they decided it was better to hide than to fight. Cowards, Captain Morrison muttered. Admiral Hayes nodded grimly. How many ships do you have left? 3, Zethkara replied. The Harmony, the Serenity, and the Hope. We have about 8,000 survivors aboard all 3 vessels. We are all that remains of a civilization that once numbered in the billions. Dr. Wilson wiped tears from her eyes. The scale of the tragedy was beyond anything humans had ever experienced. An entire species reduced to 3 ships and 8,000 souls. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Walsh called out, the Devourer ships are entering weapons range. They're moving into attack formation. Admiral Hayes looked at the tactical display, then at the image of Commander Zethkara on the screen. Commander, we're going to get your people to safety, but I need you to tell me everything you know about Devourer tactics. Zethkara nodded. They prefer to board ships rather than destroy them. They want to capture as many living beings as possible. Their boarding parties are creatures unlike anything you can imagine. Part machine, part animal, part plant. They inject some kind of neural probe that allows them to absorb memories and knowledge directly from the brain. Captain Morrison felt his blood run cold. What happens to the victims? They die, Zethkara said simply. But their knowledge lives on as part of the Devourer collective. Every scientist, every engineer, every tactical expert they absorb makes them stronger. Admiral Hayes understood now why the Kaleri had been so helpless. The Devourers weren't just fighting them, they were learning from them. Every battle made the enemy smarter and more dangerous. Admiral, Amy called out, I'm receiving a transmission from the Devourer fleet. Put it through, Admiral Hayes ordered. New voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect English with no trace of accent. Human vessels, you are interfering with our harvest. Withdraw immediately or be absorbed into our collective. Admiral Hayes felt a chill run down her spine. The Devourers had somehow learned human language just from listening to their communications. In a matter of minutes, they had absorbed and processed an entire new language. This is Admiral Hayes, she replied. We're here to protect the Kaleri. You need to leave this system immediately. The Devourer voice seemed amused. You are an interesting species. Your neural patterns show high aggression and adaptability. You will make excellent additions to our collective. We'll see about that. Admiral Hayes replied, then cut the communication. She turned to her crew. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to face an enemy that has conquered dozens of worlds and absorbed the knowledge of billions of beings. They think they know everything about warfare and tactics. Admiral Hayes smiled grimly. They're about to learn that they've never faced anything like humanity before. On the screen, Commander Zethkara watched the human admiral with amazement. Admiral Hayes, you cannot understand what you are facing. The Devourers have the combined knowledge of every species they have conquered. They know every military tactic, every weapon design, every strategy that has ever been used. Admiral Hayes nodded. That's their weakness, Commander. They know everything about how civilized species fight wars. But they don't know how we fight. What do you mean? The first Devourer ship opened fire at maximum range, sending streams of green energy toward the human fleet. Admiral Hayes watched as the alien weapon struck the shields of the UES Defiant, causing the entire ship to shudder from the impact. Return. Fire, she ordered calmly. Captain Steve Collins, commanding the Defiant, didn't hesitate. His ship's main railgun fired a tungsten projectile at incredible speed. The metal slug, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, punched through the Devourer. Ship's organic hull like it was made of paper. Direct hit, reported Lieutenant Commander Walsh from his sensor station. The alien ship is venting atmosphere and biological fluids. On the main screen, Commander Zethkara watched in amazement as the human weapon tore through the Devourer. Vessel, impossible, he whispered. No one has ever damaged them so easily, Admiral Hayes smiled grimly. Our weapons weren't designed to fight aliens, Commander. They were designed to fight other humans. And humans build the best armor and shields we know how to make. The Devourer fleet seemed surprised by the effectiveness of human weapons. Their ships, which had grown accustomed to absorbing energy weapons and adapting to alien technology, had never encountered simple kinetic projectiles fired at such incredible speeds. Captain Morrison, now coordinating the battle from the Liberty's Tactical Center, studied the enemy formation. Admiral, they're trying to surround us. Classic pincer. Movement. Let them come, Admiral Hayes replied. All ships, maintain formation. Wait for my signal. Dr. Kate Wilson was already in action, beaming over to the Kaleri ship Harmony with a medical team. The moment she materialized on the alien vessel, she was struck by how different everything looked. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal, and the air had a sweet, floral scent. Commander Zethkara met her personally, his tall frame towering over the human doctor. Dr. Wilson, thank you for coming. Our wounded are in the medical bay. Kate followed him through corridors that seemed to pulse with their own light. When they reached the medical bay, she gasped. Dozens of Kaleri lay on beds that looked more like flower petals than hospital equipment. Many were unconscious, their crystal-like skin flickering with weak light. What happened to them? Kate asked, pulling out her medical scanner. Devourer neural probes, Zethkara explained sadly. The creatures tried to absorb their memories, but we managed to rescue them before the process was complete. However, the neural damage is severe. Kate began scanning the nearest patient, a young Kaleri whose skin had turned almost black. Her scanner showed massive trauma to the alien's nervous system. I can help them, she said confidently. Human medicine is very good at treating neural trauma. Meanwhile, on the UES Relentless, Colonel Ryan Murphy was preparing his Marines for the battle ahead. He had received word that the Devourers preferred boarding actions, and he wanted to be ready. Listen up, Marines, he called out to his assembled troops. These aliens have conquered dozens of worlds by boarding enemy ships and absorbing the crews. But they've never faced human Marines before. Sergeant Lisa Torres, a veteran of the Jupiter Moon campaigns, raised her hand. Sir, what can we expect from these boarding parties? Murphy pulled up a holographic display showing the intelligence they had gathered from the Kaleri. According to our allies, Devourer boarding parties are biomechanical creatures. Part machine, Part animal, part plant? They're strong, fast, and they can adapt to damage. The Marines studied the alien creatures on the display. They looked like nightmares, with multiple arms ending in sharp claws, eyes that glowed with their own light, and mouths full of needle-like teeth. "How do we kill them?" asked Corporal Mark Davis, checking his assault rifle. "The same way we kill everything else," Murphy replied. "Lots of bullets in vital areas. Remember, these things have never fought humans before. They don't know about human tactics, human weapons, or human stubbornness." Back on the Bridge of the Liberty, the battle was intensifying. The Devourer ships had closed to medium range and were firing a variety of weapons. Energy beams, organic missiles that seemed to ride through space, and clouds of what looked like living metal dust. "Their weapons are adapting," reported Lieutenant Dan Parker from the Defiant. "The energy beams are getting stronger, and those organic missiles are learning to avoid our point defense systems." Admiral Hayes nodded. This was what the Kaleri had warned them about. The Devourers learned from every engagement, adapting their tactics and weapons to counter enemy defenses. "All ships, switch to rotating frequencies on shields and weapons," she ordered. "Don't give them time to adapt." It was a tactic that humans had developed during their own wars. When facing an adaptive enemy, you changed your approach constantly, never giving them time to learn your patterns. The human fleet began a complex dance of destruction. Ships would fire their main weapons, then immediately switch to different types of ammunition. Energy weapons would change frequencies every few seconds. Missiles would follow unpredictable flight patterns. The Devourers, accustomed to enemies who used consistent tactics, struggled to adapt to the constantly changing human strategies. "Admiral," called Captain Collins from the Defiant, "one of the alien ships is moving toward the Kaleri vessels. It's trying to get past our defensive line." Admiral Hayes saw the threat immediately. The Devourer ship was ignoring the human fleet and heading straight for the helpless Kaleri ships. If it reached them, thousands of alien refugees would be absorbed into the collective. "Intercept course," she ordered her helmsman. "All power to engines." The Liberty accelerated toward the approaching Devourer ship, her crew thrown back in their seats by the sudden forces. Human ships were built for high acceleration, designed to operate in the extreme conditions around Earth where violent maneuvers were often necessary for survival. The Devourer ship, surprised by the human vessel's speed and agility, tried to change course. But Admiral Hayes had anticipated this move. "Fire all weapons," she commanded. The Liberty's arsenal unleashed itself on the alien ship. Railgun projectiles, missile volleys, and energy beams all struck the target simultaneously. The Devourer vessel, designed to absorb and adapt to individual weapon types, couldn't handle the variety and intensity of the combined assault. The alien ship began to break apart, its biomechanical hull splitting open like a ripe fruit. Strange green fluids leaked into space as the vessel died, but the victory came at a cost. The dying Devourer ship launched its boarding pods directly at the Liberty before it was destroyed. "Incoming boarding pods," warned Lieutenant Commander Walsh. "They'll impact in 30 seconds. Admiral Hayes activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, prepare for boarding action." Marines to defensive positions. The pods struck the Liberty's hull with wet, organic sounds. Instead of cutting through the metal like normal boarding equipment, they seemed to grow through it, creating passages that pulsed with alien life. Colonel Murphy and his Marines were waiting. As the first Devourer creatures emerged from the organic tunnels, they met a wall of human firepower. The aliens were indeed nightmarish to look at. But Murphy's Marines had fought in the worst conditions humanity could imagine. They had battled in the methane storms of Titan, the crushing gravity of Europa, and the radiation fields around Jupiter. "Open fire," Murphy commanded. Human assault rifles filled the corridor with deadly projectiles. The Devourer creatures, expecting energy weapons that they could adapt to, were unprepared for simple bullets fired at high velocity. Several aliens fell immediately, their biomechanical bodies unable to quickly adapt to kinetic weapons, but others pressed forward, their claws extended and their mouths open to inject neural probes. Sergeant Torres found herself face to face with one of the creatures. Its multiple eyes focused on her, and she could see intelligence there, alien but unmistakable. It reached for her with arms that ended in sharp needles. Torres smiled and pulled the trigger of her shotgun. The alien creature was thrown backward by the blast, its organic armor no match for human weapons designed to penetrate the toughest materials Earth could produce. "These things bleed," she called out to her fellow Marines. "Keep shooting!" Dr. Wilson, still working in the Calleri medical bay, heard the sounds of battle echoing through the ship's crystal walls. She looked up from her patient, a young Calleri she had just stabilized, and saw fear in Commander Zefkara's eyes. "The Devourers are aboard your ship," he said quietly. "They will absorb your crew, learn your technologies, and become even stronger." Kate shook her head as she continued treating the wounded aliens. "They're welcome to try, but they've never met humans before." She pulled out her medical laser, a tool designed to perform delicate surgery, and checked its power settings. "Commander, I suggest you and your people stay here. This might get messy." On the bridge, Admiral Hayes watched as the battle raged throughout her ship. The Marines were holding their positions, but more boarding pods kept arriving. The Devourers were throwing everything they had at the human fleet. "Admiral," Amy called out from her communication station, "I'm detecting movement from the other Devourer ships. They're moving into boarding range." Admiral Hayes realized what was happening. The aliens had given up trying to fight the human ships directly. Instead, they were going to board every vessel in the fleet and absorb the crews. The battle had been raging for 3 hours when Captain Steve Collins made a discovery that would change everything. From the bridge of the UES Defiant, he watched as the Devourer ships moved in perfect coordination, their movements synchronized like a school of fish. "Admiral Hayes," he called over the fleet communication system, "I'm seeing something important. These ships aren't acting independently. They're moving as one unit, like they're all controlled by the same mind." Admiral Hayes, who was directing the defense of the Liberty against boarding parties, paused to consider this information. "What are you thinking, Steve?" "Look at the formation pattern," Collins replied, sending tactical data to her screen. "Every ship moves at exactly the same time. When one adapts to our weapons, they all adapt. It's not just coordination, it's like they're sharing the same brain." Dr. Paul Bennett, who had been analyzing Devourer technology from his station on the Liberty, suddenly looked up with excitement. "Admiral, Captain Collins is right. I've been studying the biosignatures from the enemy ships. They're all connected by some kind of neural network." Admiral Hayes felt a surge of hope. In all her years of military service, she had learned that every enemy had a weakness. The trick was finding it before they found yours. "Paul, are you saying these ships have a central control system?" "Exactly," Bennett replied, pulling up a 3-dimensional display of the Devourer fleet. "There's one ship at the center of their formation that's much larger than the others. It's sending out neural signals to all the other vessels. If we could take out that command ship, we might disrupt their entire fleet." On the UES Relentless, Colonel Ryan Murphy was leading his Marines through the ship's corridors, hunting down the last of the Devourer boarding parties. The aliens had proven tough to kill, but human weapons and human tactics were winning the day. "Colonel," called Sergeant Lisa Torres, who was checking her rifle after another firefight, "these things keep trying to grab our heads. What's that about?" Murphy had been wondering the same thing. "According to the Calleri, they inject neural probes to absorb memories, but they keep going for the head instead of fighting smart." It was true. The Devourer creatures seemed obsessed with capturing humans alive rather than simply killing them. They would ignore obvious tactical advantages to try to grab a Marine's head with their needle-like appendages. "They want our knowledge?" Murphy realized. "They're not trying to win this battle through fighting. They're trying to win by absorbing what we know." This was a crucial insight. The Devourers had conquered other species by learning their tactics and technologies through neural absorption, but humans fought differently than other species. Human tactics weren't based on absorbed knowledge or shared consciousness. They were based on individual initiative, creativity, and the ability to adapt in real time. Dr. Kate Wilson had finished treating the wounded Kaleri, and was now helping defend the Harmony against boarding parties. She had never been a soldier, but growing up on Earth meant knowing how to fight for survival. The medical laser in her hand hummed as she adjusted its settings to maximum power. When a devourer creature rounded the corner toward her, she didn't hesitate. The laser beam cut through the alien's biomechanical armor like it was made of soft tissue. "Doctor," called Commander Zethkara, amazement in his voice. "How did you know to do that?" Kate reloaded her laser's power cell with practiced efficiency. "On Earth, we learn to use whatever tools we have as weapons. A medical laser is still a laser?" This was something the Devourers couldn't understand. They had absorbed the knowledge of dozens of peaceful species, races that had specialized tools for specific purposes. But humans came from a world where everything was a potential weapon, where every tool could be adapted for survival. Admiral Hayes studied the tactical display showing the Devourer command ship. It was massive, easily 5 times the size of the Liberty, and it was surrounded by layers of smaller vessels. Getting to it would require breaking through the entire enemy fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Hayes," she announced over the fleet. "Communication system. We've identified the enemy's weakness. That big ship in the center is controlling their entire fleet. We need to destroy it." Captain Morrison, who had been coordinating defensive actions throughout the ship, looked at the tactical display with concern. "Admiral, that's a suicide mission. We'd have to fly straight through their entire fleet to reach it." Admiral Hayes smiled grimly. "Steve, have you ever heard of the Charge of the Light Brigade?" Morrison nodded. "It was a famous military disaster from Earth's history where cavalry charged directly into enemy cannons. Admiral, that didn't end well." "No, it didn't," Hayes agreed. "But it did prove something important about humans. When we decide to do something, we do it completely, regardless of the cost." She opened the channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, we're going to do something that no civilized species would ever attempt. We're going to charge directly at their command ship and destroy it." Throughout the human fleet, crew members looked at each other with a mixture of fear and excitement. This was the kind of crazy, impossible plan that only humans would even consider. Captain Collins understood immediately. "Admiral, you want to use the Liberty as a battering ram?" "Exactly. All escort ships will clear a path. The Liberty goes straight for the command ship and takes it out at close range." Dr. Bennett checked his sensors one more time. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive neural activity from that command ship. It's not just controlling the fleet, it's thinking for them. If we destroy it, the other ships might not be able to function independently." This was humanity's advantage. Humans had evolved as individuals who could think and act independently. They didn't rely on hive minds or shared consciousness. Every human could make decisions, adapt to new situations, and fight effectively without central control. The charge began with the destroyers leading the way, their weapons blazing as they carved a path through the Devourer fleet. The alien ships, confused by this direct assault, tried to adapt their formations to counter the human attack, but the humans weren't following any established tactical doctrine. They were improvising, each captain making independent decisions based on the immediate situation. The Devourers, accustomed to predictable enemy behaviors, couldn't adapt fast enough. The used Defiant took massive damage as it punched through the alien defensive line, but Captain Collins kept his ship moving forward. His crew worked with the efficiency of people who had trained together for years, each person knowing exactly what to do without being told. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported his damage control officer. "We're venting atmosphere." "Seal it," Collins ordered calmly. "All power to forward weapons." This was another human advantage. Humans were used to operating in hostile environments where equipment failed and situations changed rapidly. Earth had taught them to keep fighting even when everything was going wrong. The Liberty broke through the final defensive line with Admiral Hayes at the helm. The massive Devourer command ship loomed ahead of them, its biomechanical surface pulsing with alien energy. "All weapons fire," Hayes commanded. The Liberty unleashed everything it had. Railguns, missiles, energy weapons, and experimental devices that human engineers had built for fighting other humans. The combined firepower struck the command ship's hull and began tearing it apart. The alien vessel tried to defend itself, but it had never faced weapons designed with such focused, destructive intent. Human weapons weren't just tools of war, they were expressions of millions of years of evolutionary pressure from the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Dr. Wilson, watching from the Calari ship, saw something amazing happen. As the command ship began to die, the other Devourer vessels simply stopped moving. They drifted in space like lost children, their shared consciousness severed. "It's working," she called out to Commander Zethkara. "They're disconnected from each other." Without their central control system, the individual Devourer ships couldn't function. They had become so dependent on their hive mind that they couldn't think or act independently. The human fleet, meanwhile, continued fighting with undiminished effectiveness. Each ship operated independently, each crew member knew their job, and each captain could adapt to changing situations without waiting for orders from above. Colonel Murphy's Marines finished clearing the last Devourer boarding parties from the Relentless. The alien creatures, cut off from their collective consciousness, became confused and disoriented. They wandered the corridors aimlessly until the Marines found them. "It's over," Murphy announced to his troops. "The enemy command structure has collapsed." As the massive command ship finally exploded in a brilliant flash of green light, the remaining Devourer vessels began to drift away from the battle. Without their guiding intelligence, they were just biological machines following basic programming. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Liberty, looking out at the debris field that had been the Devourer fleet. Her ship was damaged, her crew was exhausted, but they had won. "Admiral," Amy called from her communications station, "I'm receiving a message from Commander Zethkara." The Calari commander's face appeared on the main screen, and for the first time since they had met him, he was smiling. "Admiral Hayes, I don't know how to thank you. You have saved not just the Calari people, but